Okay, guys, welcome to our compliance conversations hosted by Insurance Licensing Services of America and Spot On Insurance. Today we're covering Puerto Rico, the tax benefits for the insurance community. Whether you are an insurance broker, agency, principal, carrier profession, if you've heard rumors about a 4% tax, come join us and find out more. We'll also chat about how you can get your agency a PR license. Today we're streaming on LinkedIn and Facebook Live.
So guys, thank you so much for joining us. This is actually going to be a little bit of a deviation from our normal webinars in so much that it's going to be 2 hours rather than 1 hour. You are also able to put all of your questions into the Q&A section, and Joyce King will be fielding all of those questions. And yeah, right now, if you have any of those questions, just put them in the Q&A section and we'll take it from there. And so, Ted, if you'll just introduce all of our guest panelists.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why we had to go so long is because we have so many panelists, never mind a large number of participants on the other side. So to start off with, we've got Edward Rivera-Maldonado.
Hi.
And attorney highly experienced with the regulation of the PR insurance industry. Take note. He is a former Puerto Rico Chief Deputy Commissioner, where he worked for the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance of PR for over 30 years. He has vast governmental affairs and international insurance relations experience with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, NAIC, and the Association of Latin American Insurance Supervisor, ASSAL. We've got Will Duffy here. Will, take a bow. Chartered financial consultant, Accelerated Wealth, LLC. Will is the author of the industry-rattling book series, The Other Side of the Coin, which includes the eye-opening Compound Interest, 10 Financial Truths to Protect Your Wealth. He has earned high praise from legends such as IRA expert Ed Slott, who wrote the book's foreword. Originally from Colorado, he and his family now call the Isla del Encanto, PR, their home.
Welcome.
Welcome, you two. Take over.
Alberto Bacó-Bagué. He is the founder and general director of the Partnership for Modern Puerto Rico, of which we are members. Alberto is an ambassador, business developer, board member, and investor. He thrives as ambassador of Puerto Rico's way of life, promoting and educating about Type A products, services, and capital investment opportunities. He is successfully creating long-term relationships with individuals that are here in Puerto Rico under the Tax Act and long-standing families of Puerto Rico. He is an amazing individual and constantly adding value. Then we have Ruben Ortiz, President. If you will raise your hand up, President, because I know it sometimes gets confusing for me. I know I've texted one and meaning to text the other because we have junior and senior on the panel today. But Junior's areas of expertise are Puerto Rico's International Insurance Center, which is Act 399, Export of Service Companies, Act 20, Investor Relocation, Act 22, privately owned insurance companies, private placement life insurance, reinsurance intermediation, and insurance placements. Next on our panel list is Walter Keenan. Raise your hand, Walt. He is the CEO of Advantage Insurance. Advantage Insurance, through its operating subsidiaries, provide customized insurance products and services to businesses and individuals worldwide. They were founded in 1993 to manage self-insurance programs for businesses. Advantage today serves way over 300 clients and administers way over $1 billion of insurance assets from its headquarters in beautiful San Juan, Puerto Rico, and they have a beautiful location. Next, we have Ruben Gely-Rodriguez, and that is senior. He has spent over 25 years at the Puerto Rico Insurance Commissioner's Office, and that's where we first met him over 10 years ago. His specialties are the Insurance Code of Puerto Rico, international insurance, regulatory compliance, captive insurance, segregated asset structures, Insurance-Linked Securities, Private Placement Life Insurance, Act 399. And then sharing firsthand knowledge on Puerto Rico licensing are our ILSA team members. Christy Roberts, who is our licensing manager, Sabrina Slater, who is our manager of the corporates and annuals department. And then we also have Joyce King at the top of the screen, and she is our quality assurance administrator. And she's going to be fielding all the questions that are sent in to ccquestions@ilsainc.com. Then along at the top of the screen is Russ Foster, our general manager. He is the man on the helm of our Texas team, and he can be reached at 254-729-8002. Christian Masonette, he is our spot-on insurance manager, and he is going to be handling all of our tech today. And again, as we talked at, as Ted mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, we are streaming this live on LinkedIn and Facebook. That's the first time that we're doing that. You know, the replay will also be on our YouTube channel. So today, oh my goodness, I am so excited that we are going to be talking about Puerto Rico tax benefits, Puerto Rico licensing. Joyce, what do we have up our sleeve today?
Real quick for our listeners, as she's mentioned, please submit your questions through the Q&A. If you put them in the chat, there's a chance I won't see them because sometimes the chat moves pretty quickly. So if you'll submit through the Q&A, I will present to the panel. Also, if after we're done you still have questions or you want to connect with any of our individuals, send that to ccquestions@ilsainc.com and we will put you in direct connection with any of our panelists today. So the flow of our conversation today is going to start with the tax benefits of setting up in Puerto Rico. We will move then into incentives specifically for the insurance industry, and then we will round out our conversation with more on the licensing process toward the end. We have slated 2 hours, and I hope that we can get it all in within that time, so I won't gab too much. We'll move right into it. Before we start with our panelists, though, I did say, I told you guys when we talked about setting this up that I would like for you, Ted and Arleen, to just share with us your journey. What took you to Puerto Rico? What made you make that decision to move to Puerto Rico?
Yeah, that's a great way to start because maybe some of our attendees don't know, but we are broadcasting. Ted and I are in Puerto Rico, as is Christian. We moved here back in late 2016. We loved Puerto Rico. We were going to buy another home in Puerto Rico. We were house hunting when we met up for dinner one night with our friends that moved to Puerto Rico from New York. And as we were having dinner with them, they talked to us more and more about the Tax Act. And we were like, yeah, we've heard about the Tax Act, but we didn't know that it could be applicable for us. And
or how. And
yeah.
What they said to us was, look, I'm gonna hook you up with our lawyer, make an appointment for tomorrow, go see her, see what she has to say. And we were like, okay, let's do it. And when it was all explained to us, as I told our staff when I got back to Texas, we're moving in 3 months. And what I said to them was, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. It's 4%, and you know, I could start another business, another part of the business over there. We can on the island, we can use that as our headquarters from there. And we've never looked back. We haven't looked back since. And it really has been a boon to us and to our company.
Yeah, so that was in August of 2016, and we officially moved like October 31st of 2016 to Puerto Rico. So we made the transition very, very quickly and, you know, do a lot of things to promote our business, our brick and mortar in Texas. And it's been a great situation for us, for all of us.
I remember when you came to the office there at ILSA and y'all told us you were moving, and we were like, what? Puerto Rico?
Guys, let me throw you a picture. I was I stood in front of, imagine 40, 50 people at the time. And I stood up in front and I started doing math on the board. And they looked at me like I said, we're moving to Puerto Rico. And they were all like, what? Are you crazy? After I did the numbers and talked to everybody, a bunch of them came up and says, you guys got to do it. You got to do it.
But Russ, I'm sure you remember, what was the biggest concern? What was our folks' biggest concern?
I can only remember my biggest concern because you guys turned to me and said, okay, Russ, you got it.
But the second biggest concern, or the concern from the rest of the employees, is
I think it was the
is it legal?
well,
Is it legal? Yes. And like, take us through this, because we don't think that this is really something that's legal. That was the big.
Still some concerns about
that. My concern was, when would I get my invite? I'm still waiting for you to bring me to Puerto Rico.
We just had another manager here last week. So.
Yes.
I know. So lucky.
I can't go back because I'm a wanted man in Puerto Rico.
Well, I think y'all should put us on a rotation, and as soon as I'm free of what's going on with me, I want to go.
Rhoda.
Yeah.
That's the first question, always. It is legal, that's impossible. You think that you can get away from the IRS, but I tell everyone, we have the FBI, but no IRS. Very easy. We have the DEA, the FBI, all the protections, but not the IRS.
Oh gosh.
Arleen, I desperately want to, I've heard you say it before and it sounds beautiful. I would like to hear you say in Spanish, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico.
Oh my goodness, Joyce, you're putting me on the spot, because I know that you actually typed it out for me. Our people, and we are, oh my gosh. So it's Estado Libre de Puerto Rico, something. Asociado, okay.
So say it all together again.
Estado Libre Asociado de Puerto Rico.
Isn't that beautiful? That is lovely. I like that. We talk like that.
Puerto Rico.
But I can't roll my R, so I won't even try.
I know you can't.
Okay, let's get started. Will, I know you have to leave right at in about 45 minutes from now, and so we've got you up first, you and Alberto. If y'all can kind of get started talking to us about the various tax incentives for individuals and businesses that are relocating to Puerto Rico, and be sure to talk to us about the residency requirement.
Great. Glad to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. I thought it would be appropriate to start out with just a real quick overview, because there's a lot of misconceptions about Puerto Rico. I hear this a lot, that Puerto Rico is a different country. Puerto Ricans are not U.S. citizens, etc. So just high level, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. U.S. territories are under the jurisdiction of the United States. Puerto Rico, as a U.S. territory, has their own government and their own tax system. Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. You don't need a passport to travel to Puerto Rico, and Puerto Ricans spend the U.S. dollar. So hopefully that'll clear up a lot of the misconceptions that are out there. Maybe even encourage some people to travel and visit and check out Puerto Rico. The nature of a U.S. territory having their own government and especially their own tax system is kind of the genesis or the foundation of potential tax benefits. If people are reading online, as they're hearing about these, they're going to find these different acts. And the current act is Act 60. And that's kind of a unification of the previous two acts, which were Act 20 and Act 22. And essentially there are two different tax benefits, one for individuals, one for businesses. And we can cover both of those. And people should understand that those can be applied for separately. You don't have to do both. You can do one or the other, or you can do both. I'll start with the Individual Act, which is essentially for people who are looking to eliminate taxation from their investments. And so if people apply for this and they're approved and they essentially move to Puerto Rico, we'll talk about those tests in a second, and become Puerto Rico residents, they get a 100% exemption from capital gains taxes and interest and dividend income that is Puerto Rico sourced. So you'll find a lot of people who do a lot in the stock market. A lot of people who do a lot in cryptocurrency will take advantage of this, because by being approved and moving here, all of not only the taxes, whether it's capital gains or short-term, long-term capital gains, but just the hassle as well of having to track and pay those taxes can all be eliminated. So that's a significant one. There's obviously a lot of details, and I don't think we're gonna have time to cover all of those today. So I always recommend that people, dig into this, hire professionals, attorneys, to really look if this makes sense for them. But big picture, there are 3 tests that people need to qualify for to make sure that they're being compliant. And that's the residency test, the tax home test, and the closer connection test. The residency one is a big one. And Joyce, thanks for asking me to cover that. The residency test is essentially spending a majority of your time each calendar year, so January 1st to December 31st, physically on the island of Puerto Rico. The fact that a year is an odd number of days, 365, means that you cannot spend the same amount of days here as you do elsewhere. There's always going to be somewhere that has more. And so 183 happens to be the magic number, where if you do 183 days minimum on the island of Puerto Rico, you are there for a majority of that year. So that's kind of the marker, if you will, the line in the sand. And that's really looked at as kind of the minimum threshold, but that would establish somebody to, pass the presence test and be valid for these tax benefits. And then let's go to the business side. This one is different. You can essentially, through the Export Services Act, which again used to be Act 20, now falls under Act 60. If you fall into the categories of businesses eligible for this, I believe there's 18 categories, and you essentially are able to export services from mainland United States, stateside, to Puerto Rico and run the business from Puerto Rico. So for example, Ted and Arleen are physically in Puerto Rico right now, and they're still running their stateside business. Then you qualify for these tax benefits. And how these work is you're essentially set up as a Puerto Rico corporation. It's similar to a C Corp, but different. And the tax on the business income is a flat 4%. That's on the corporation income. And then a lot of people are familiar with double taxation, which you get with a traditional C corporation. So you have a 4% tax on the corporation here in Puerto Rico, and then distributions are tax-free. So essentially the money comes into the corporation and then it's distributed out to you as a business owner, and the combined tax of 4% and 0%, just as Ted mentioned, you end up with a flat 4% tax. And so a lot of people who, may not be looking for trying to eliminate, capital gains or ordinary income tax on their portfolios or their cryptocurrency, but run businesses, they look at this as a possibility for them as well. It all comes down to, can they run the business from Puerto Rico? That's the export part, is essentially bringing revenue from the 50 states over to the territory of Puerto Rico. And if it works, it can be a very, very significant advantage. It's something that Ted and Arleen took advantage of, and it's actually something that I took advantage of as well. I actually did not know that you guys moved here on October 31st of that year. We actually moved on October 31st as well, just in 2019. So,
Whoa.
fun coincidence there.
Very, very good.
Yeah, so we did the same thing, and I transitioned my business, and now I run it from Puerto Rico. I'm in Puerto Rico right now, and it's pretty fun, both from a financial perspective, but also just from a historical perspective and culture perspective, getting to learn new things, new ideas, try new foods, etc. So hopefully that's a good overview to get us started.
Awesome. Absolutely.
Thank you,
so
Will.
much.
And Will has moved here with, he has a young family, several children, including a baby that's just a few months old. And, we've gotten to hang out with all of them, and we're happy to, that he's here in Puerto Rico.
We actually wish he was here in Palmas, but
I know.
he's closer. But we'll keep trying.
We'll see.
Very good.
So Joyce.
And Joyce, if you will let me just step in for a minute, because we never, ever want to get a regulator on our bad side. And somehow, when you're very close to people, sometimes you tend to not shine the spotlight on them. It happens to us with our team members. But I failed to introduce our regulator that's on the panel today, which is Joanne Delgado. Joanne Delgado is a vice president at the Surplus Lines Association of California. She is the head of the education and compliance area. And this is a role that she's had almost, probably about 8 months or 10 months or so, Joanne. And Joanne used to be in the private sector. She was with a very large carrier, and she is a dear colleague of ours that we've known for many, many years. So thank you, Joanne, for joining us. And I am sorry for not having introduced you earlier.
Oh, Deborah.
All right, Joyce, back to you. Or are we with Alberto?
We are with Alberto.
Well, let me take it where Will left it. A lot of people move to Puerto Rico because they are enthused by the tax advantages, but in reality, it's also a lifestyle decision. And most of the new residents that I know will say we move for the taxes, but we love Puerto Rico because of its people. So that's important to keep in mind. I would like to compliment a little bit of a very good presentation by Will. The usual questions that come is this something that the government can take away? And that's very important for you to know that this is a contract that you sign with the government of Puerto Rico. It's never been violated, and there are no retroactive amendments. So you get a decree for 20 years usually that can be extended 10 more years, and as it happened in the past, many of them continue to get extended. This program that I call it now a movement, for me, it's very important because it's creating a new Puerto Rico. It's attracting a talent that we have never attracted to our island. And we are attracting it in sufficient critical mass to create a different and more dynamic and thriving Puerto Rico. So we are in that process of changing from an economic development model where we used to attract and target manufacturing companies. And now, basically what we're doing is we're incentivizing the individual, and we are incentivizing the individuals that want to do business from Puerto Rico or are active in business. So that's the approach, to give you at the individual level capital gains exemption and passive income exemption, and then on your business activities, you basically can do almost everything from Puerto Rico. Even the most extreme, which is owning real estate and managing real estate in the US, which usually is taxed at the place where the real estate is, but you can manage them from Puerto Rico and create a management agreement and management income tax at 4%. So the challenge is always to look more in detail, look more, because at the end of the day, you can move US source income, make it legally become Puerto Rico source income, and that's the key to it, to be able to move it and create Puerto Rico source income. So the activities are very diverse, and is how you approach them. Another good example that is usually bring is that maybe in the crypto sector, you cannot mine the coins in Puerto Rico and be exempted, but you can trade them. And that trading income is Puerto Rico source income. There's also benefits for non-residents, which is something that you should keep in your mind, that not everyone is ready to move or want to move. And there's still structures that will make your returns a lot higher by using either the International Insurance Center, what it provides, the international banking entities, or export services entities. Those that I described, again, summarizing, we have incentives at the level of the individual. We have incentives for manufacturing. We have incentive for research and development. We have incentives for export services, for insurance companies, which have not only the tax advantages, but many other advantages that experts will talk to you about. We have segregated sales and many other advantages from doing business in Puerto Rico. And international banking entities are very powerful because it's not a huge capital that is required, and they eventually, after a process of showing their compliance mechanism, they can clear through the Federal Reserve system. So it's also a very powerful vehicle to do business. I hope that during the afternoon you make any questions. Again, I believe that this program is transforming Puerto Rico. We are US citizens, we are US land. All the federal laws except the tax laws apply. And so there's patent protection, there are intangible protections, and also we have a critical mass of very good professionals in Puerto Rico. That's very important because in other jurisdictions, you don't find the type of professional that you find in Puerto Rico, and not only the ones that are located in Puerto Rico, the talent pool that have moved to the US that wants to come back if you offer a nice job opportunity. So thanks for the opportunity. I'm here for questions all afternoon.
Hey, Joyce, before we even do a deep dive more into the insurance side, I just want to throw this out. So let's say, for example, that I, as an individual, under what used to be Tax Act 22, now it's called Tax Act 60 because all of the tax acts are under that. Let's say I purchased a home, and I'm going to just throw this out to Will real quick. And I sell that home and I have a capital gains of $200,000. What happens with that capital gains when I sell that piece of real estate?
Yeah, great question. So this is definitely a complicated one. I'll do my best and then Alberto can finish for me. When it comes to capital gains, what's important is essentially keeping track of your gains from when you became what's known as a bona fide resident. And so what a lot of people will do when they have, assets with built-in capital gains, which is what we're talking about, they will essentially get maybe a transfer pricing study, but they'll essentially establish a certain value from when they make the transition and become a bona fide resident. And then depending on a lot of other details, but assuming that it works, the gains past that point can be exempt from taxation. Any gains that you have built in from prior to moving to Puerto Rico essentially stay with the US.
Right. And so I kind of threw out the scenario of real estate, but the same goes with the sale of a business. So if you are an agency principal and you are looking to sell your business in the future, and you move to Puerto Rico, you would kind of do a valuation from the time before you moved to Puerto Rico, and then a valuation from the time that you moved to Puerto Rico. The time that you move to Puerto Rico to the time of the sale,
Right.
It's going to be taxed at the favorable tax rate of 4%, that gain. No, I'm sorry, zero capital gains.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Zero. And then one other thing I'll add to that is that there is a way if you come here with a gain and you're here for 10 years, that the entire gain is wiped out. So there's a couple different nuances there.
Accountant to the stars.
That's it.
That's our financial advisor right there.
You guys know why. Add a little business piece. What we have seen, a lot of the new residents, they are saving a lot of taxes, and they invest in local real estate, which in certain areas is going up, and basically they make a tax-free gain on those investments with the savings that they had from federal taxes. So it's a good move.
So for our listeners who want to do some of their own research, help me here. There was a Tax Act 22 that has been replaced now by Tax Act 60. Is that right?
Yes, what they did is that they grouped all the different tax incentives laws under one act, Act number 60. So okay. We keep using, it's like a brand, we keep using Act 20 and 22, but in reality is Act 60 now, which groups the former Act 73, which is the manufacturing and research and development incentives, and Act 74, which is the tourism incentives. Investing in tourism properties in Puerto Rico is also very advantageous because the government provides a tax credit on investments, a 40% tax credit, and also it taxes only 10% of the income. So there is the possibility of stacking benefits.
Well, if we're ready, if we don't have any questions coming into the Q&A at this point, we will kind of switch gears and go into a little bit of the benefits specific to insurance. and talk to Mr. Ruben Gely Sr., Ruben Gely Jr., and Walter Keenan. And if I can start with both of our Rubens, could you just kind of go ahead and give us sort of a general overview? You can fight over who goes first, covering these insurance incentives.
Yes, hello everybody, and first of all, thanks for Ted and Arleen for this wonderful opportunity. It's so great to have you as our friends and part of our community. Okay, Ruben Jr. will explain a little more about the tax incentive for international insurer, but what I would like to do, if you allow me, is to a little bit of background of our insurance market, so it will make sense, you know, to everybody where this legislation came from. Our insurance market, okay, in Puerto Rico is quite developed. It's a 14 billion market, which if you compare to Latin America, other Latin America countries, is about the third, you know, in written premium. So compared to our region or physical, you know, or size of our country is quite significant. And I'm talking about official numbers, okay? And in a per capita basis, we are number one in Latin America. I told you already, it's a 14 billion market, about 4% growth, okay, from 2018, which is, you know, good compared to the rest of our economy. We have some challenges. About 80% of that, or 75% of that 14 billion is health insurance related, okay? And about 386 companies do business in Puerto Rico, most of them domiciled in the US, okay? And about 50 domestic companies. Those 50 companies, because of something that I will try to explain, however, dominate about 90% of the market. And the basic reason for that is very relevant to this conversation, okay? Which is the premium tax exemption, okay? So if a company that set up a platform in Puerto Rico to serve the domestic market and complies, of course, with certain rules, it will be exempted from premium tax. And that, you know, with time has turned out for the domestic platform to dominate basically the market. It's because these, if you like to say, control or big market share of the domestic companies, that back in 2004, okay, well, we came up with this special legislation that we call then International Insurance Center, which is basically a regime where capital can establish in Puerto Rico to do business outside Puerto Rico. And it, you know, it was approved with certain incentives for that, and Ruben Antonio or Ruben Jr. will get into that. But before I leave the domestic market, another important thing that we should think about is that important domestic market, the 14 billion market, creates opportunities for U.S. producers to do a business using, you know, as a platform, our market. That's because Puerto Rico basically is NAIC accredited jurisdiction, and because of that, our producers, okay, can get a reciprocity with other jurisdictions. One of our panelists, Mr. Edward Rivera-Maldonado, is really the expert on that, and he will explain it better than I. But that's an opportunity. Using our domestic platform, market as platform to do business non-resident in other states. And actually also that could be tied up with the Law 20 legislation that Mr. Bacó and will explain it so well. So that's what the background, okay, for our creation of the international insurance legislation. And maybe Ruben Jr. can then explain it if you want the details about the International Insurance Center.
Thank you. Take it away, Ruben Jr.
So thank you, Arleen and Ted, again for the opportunity. Ruben Sr. get the background summary on the domestic insurance market. I guess my job will be more to explain how Puerto Rico has positioned itself as an international insurance jurisdiction, which is very interesting to me. Obviously, seeing Puerto Rico growing domestically, Ruben Sr. mentioned a $14 billion industry that continues to grow over time. But apart from that, apart from the domestic experience that Puerto Rico clearly has, since 2004, it has decided to position itself also as an international insurance jurisdiction. And that means that international investors can come to Puerto Rico, set up insurance companies to assume risks that are not located in Puerto Rico, therefore claiming the benefits of what's known the International Insurance Center, or Act 399 of the Puerto Rico Insurance Code. This law was formed in 2004, basically authorized 2005, and since then it has taken a very impressive and interesting route. Over 48 companies have licensed in Puerto Rico, international insurers. Of those, in excess of 480 protected cells, which is one of the benefits of the Puerto Rico legislation, that it creates the opportunity for international insurers to segregate individual asset plans that are to made available for investors or clients that are not located in Puerto Rico. And therefore, that international insurer can basically become a captive manager inside of its own license and offer the benefits of Puerto Rico to third parties, people not located in Puerto Rico that basically want to claim the advantages without having to go through the process of being licensed as an international insurer. And in that respect, Puerto Rico has been competitive and continues to be thriving in spite of the circumstances that are happening around the world. In fact, it's interesting that not only Puerto Rico's International Insurance Center has allowed for captive insurance companies to operate, which is the more traditional or more popular way of self-insurance, vehicles, but it has also opened up doors for international life reinsurers, as well as other platforms that could be available in the future, such as the securitization of assets and other interesting models that are yet to come. But I guess my point is that Puerto Rico is not only focused on captive insurance, it's also very well a place for other types of opportunities. Mr. Walter Keenan, the participant in this call, is the CEO of Advantage Insurance, which is, I would say, the king of life insurance in Puerto Rico. And in that respect, it's a clear opportunity or clear side of, what's different from captives, or what's different from the, just pure self-insurance mechanisms that are available. But Puerto Rico is much more than that. And I guess in that respect, what we have seen is that the legislation is flexible. It continues to grow, and it gives benefits to not only U.S. participants, but participants in Latin America and across the world as well. So with that respect, I also want to mention that the International Insurance Center has been supported by an organization called the Puerto Rico International Insurers Association, PRIA. And it's an excellent organization that basically puts together the interest of all the owners and participants of the international insurers. And together we help make decisions and we support the government when changes are to be made. And, we participate as an industry as much as possible. So that's something, that definitely is important. And again, I want to make sure that Mr. Keenan has the opportunity to explain in a more personal way, since he's I'm more of a consultant. Walter is more of an executive actually managing an insurance company in Puerto Rico. So his insight, I think, are much more valuable than mine. So Walter, I push the ball to you. Well, anyways, yeah, that's my brief explanation of Puerto Rico's International Insurance Center. And I appreciate, again, the opportunity, Arleen and Ted.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Walter
Absolutely.
is up. Walter is our go-to person whenever I get a client or an individual that says, I want to make the transition to Puerto Rico, other than us, like they want to know like real life experience of an insurance carrier, an insurance executive that has made the move. I send them over to Walter. I say, Walter, do you have some time to talk to them? So Walt, you're up.
Great. Thanks very much, Arleen. Thanks, Ruben. Advantage Insurance, I think, not just as a statement of fact and not of anything else, is the largest consumer of both the insurance tax grants and also the other grants available under the various Puerto Rico programs. We don't have all of them, but we have a lot of them. And I think the thing that I can probably add to the discussion that might be interesting is that you can combine them. You can put the different grants and incentives together in a way that make it work for your business, make it work for your customers, and make it work for your people. And our perspective is from the carrier side, as companies that issue life insurance policies to people from around the world, not anywhere but Puerto Rico. In the International Insurance Center, you're not allowed to do business on the domestic market in Puerto Rico. All the customers have to be international, meaning not Puerto Rico, so US, rest of world. So we have our customers that benefit because they get the benefits of Puerto Rico's segregation of assets and liabilities, so that they don't have to take sort of carrier risk in their captives or in their programs they're doing. And the life insurance side, that's very important. If you have using life insurance as more of an investment vehicle, it's good to have your investments segregated from other people's. Puerto Rico lets you do that, and lets you do that with no tax. No premium tax on the way in, no tax on the way out. It's a truly tax-free jurisdiction. As Alberto said, we have the benefit of the FBI yes, IRS no. And that's a universal, that translates into all languages. So it's a good jurisdiction from a life insurance point of view. Captive insurance, Ruben touched on. Captive insurance is terrific. It's better than Bermuda for captives. So that's great from an insurance customer's point of view, and carriers can set up to serve those customers. There are two other things that our company does, or maybe three that could be relevant to the group assembled today. The first of those three is that we have an Act 20 management company. I think Will and others discussed Act 20. Act 20, which is now under, I guess, Law 60, but for simplicity, we all call it Act 20, is the export services companies. And that's where you can do business in Puerto Rico as long as you don't do it with Puerto Ricans and not pay tax or pay a minimum tax rate on the income earned in that activity. Okay. Now, from an insurance point of view, the management of the insurance carriers and the captives, as Ruben alluded to, can be done by an Act 20 company, as long as the customer is not inside Puerto Rico. As long as your end customer is in the US or somewhere else, then that counts as international, or it can. You have to get your grant set up. And I want to thank, on this phone, we have Ruben Sr., who was helpful as when his time in the insurance department, when we got set up, Office of the Commissioner, and Alberto Bacó, when he was the head of the Department of Economic Development, actually issued the grants that we operate under today. So if you can get it set up right, you can essentially have income earned in Puerto Rico from your insurance services business that is not taxed. And that includes the income that you earn from managing your Puerto Rico carriers for non-Puerto Rico clients. So we have an Act 20 company where all our employees work, and that company manages our insurance carriers in Puerto Rico. Now, interestingly, if you happen to have an Act 22 personal grant, you can bring that into the mix as well. This is the second of the three things that you can do. An Act 22 person working for an Act 20 company can take the profits out of that company, or distributions paid as profits, not your salary. Salary gets taxed. But if you make money in that company and you own that company, in theory, the profits that you pay yourself are also exempt from tax in Puerto Rico. It's Puerto Rico source investment income. So it's a way to bring your business to Puerto Rico and then have the profitability of that business that you put in your own pocket not be taxed. Okay. And I just say it again, not taxed. Okay.
Not taxed.
That's good. All right. So that's the second thing. The third thing that you can do, that we do, and there are probably more, but within our insurance sort of complex, within our carriers, our Act 20 management company, our Act 22 people who work there, we also we utilize the bank law, which was, I think, Act 273, and may have some other applications or new names, but it's 273 is the old name for the bank law. They're called international financial entities. And we use an IFE. We have an IFE. It's called Advantage International Bank Corp. That's very creative because the requirement says it has to have the name international in it and bank. So, and Corp or Inc. or something LLC at the end. So that's how we came up with that creative name. I think Ruben Jr. came up with that name, by the way. So it's you needed to put something down on a piece of paper. So we had, so the bank is a very interesting thing because it can let you act as a fiduciary and do all sorts of trust services that we haven't begun to explore yet. Reg 114, collateral trusts, fiduciary services, claims. You could probably do some interesting things with claims between the 273 and your Act 2020 manager. There's lots of stuff that you can do because what it does is it lets you essentially act as the bank. And you can hold funds, you can take deposits, you can do lots of things that you need a bank to do, but it's hard to get banks to do. Our little insurance industry has a hard time getting banks to serve it effectively. They like to just do simple stuff and charge you big fees, but if you need 114 collateral trust, or you need something, some stream of disbursements, or you need something special, they kind of say, well, we don't really do that. And so if you're having trouble finding a bank to serve your needs for your clients and their insurance programs, ours might be able to help, but if you need one, just come down and start your own. It can go in your insurance complex and in your network of insurance businesses that you have in Puerto Rico. So anyone who's listening that has an agency, has a managing general underwriter, has any participant in what I call the risk chain, where you touch money, touch premium, hold premium, use, whatever you're doing there. I believe that Puerto Rico can be a very effective domicile from which to do that. And I just say to everybody, come on in. The water's great. We're having a great time, and it's a fantastic jurisdiction. We moved here. We moved our company headquarters to Puerto Rico from Cayman Islands in 2015, and we moved the actual legal entity in 2016. We still have subsidiaries in Cayman Islands and United States and elsewhere. But Puerto Rico is our home. It's our headquarters. It's fantastic, and we encourage anyone in the insurance business who is looking for ease of operation and low tax rates to consider Puerto Rico as the place to come.
Wow.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you.
Real quick, before Will Duffy has to run, and I know you have to run pretty soon, one of our questions that came in, we have two. One of them is tax related. So the question, so if I move to Puerto Rico, I can't escape capital gains earned prior to my move. I still owe the IRS, but hang on, sorry. I still owe the IRS for that, but capital gains earned after I move are tax-free. Is that correct?
Essentially, yes. Yeah, the term people like to use is bifurcation, which essentially means just putting a kind of a marker in place as to when you became a bona fide resident, and then you have a built-in gain prior to that, and then you have gains after that. And generally speaking, the gains after that, you can avoid taxation.
That question. Another question, and maybe this is for Edward, I'm not sure. Someone says, what about cyber risk insurance local market maturity in Puerto Rico?
I don't think that question is going, it's for me actually, maybe Ruben Haley or someone else, because I don't think it's actually for me, that question.
Okay.
Let's shoot that question to Walter. Maybe he has an answer to that.
We buy cyber risk insurance, and we buy it from the carrier whose name is on our building that we operate from in downtown San Juan, Hato Rey. We have some captives that provide cyber for their clients as part of what they do for captive insurance. And to me, I think that cyber is just another risk. I got to tell you, I don't like the price that we pay for cyber, and maybe our company that manages captives should have a captive ourselves because it's too expensive. So it's something that you probably want to buy. You might want to buy from your captive, and it's a legal asset class or liability class in Puerto Rico to insure through a captive. So I mean, it's no, I don't think it's any different than anywhere else.
Thank you. Here's a third question. What would you say, this is to anyone, what would you say to those who are afraid to do business in Puerto Rico due to fraud concerns in the insurance business?
Well, fraud is something that you gotta take care anywhere. I mean, it's not related to Puerto Rico or any other place. I mean, we do have Chapter 27 here in Puerto Rico in our insurance code that deals with most of the fraud issues, and we do have a strong laws here against fraud, and we also have within the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance consumer protections team that will take care of any kind of fraud regarding the insurance industry. So you shouldn't be afraid of that. We have taken care of that in the past here in Puerto Rico. Again, we have some of the laws associated with fraud here in Puerto Rico that are quite very similar to those developed by the NAIC as model law. So we are covering fraud against insurance here in Puerto Rico.
Excellent, thank you, Edward.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that, that with respect to businesses that have to do with captive insurance or any other privately held insurance as part of the International Insurance Center, the risk of fraud may be limited or I guess in a way avoided due to the fact that the owner of the captive or the owner of that insurance policy has the way of basically saying who the investment advisor is going to be, where the assets are going to be held, and that flexibility gives the owner, much more room in terms of where he wants these assets to be and what safeguards he wants to put in place. So it's not as he's going to basically give control access to his assets or his insurance products to, someone crazy in Puerto Rico. Most of the products that are offered through the International Insurance Center, the owner has ways in which to protect his assets. So just wanted to bring that.
Thank you.
In fact, let me add to that. You have confidential lines that you can use within the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance to contact them and pass information, and they will really investigate about any suspicious activities regarding fraud, insurance fraud.
Real quick, Will, this might be for you, and I know you got to run, so I'm going to ask this one real fast. I own an S Corp and collect W-2 for part of my income and take shareholder distributions for the rest. Would I still need to take a W-2 for myself if I move to Puerto Rico?
Sure. So the answer is yes. The W-2, though, will not be from the S Corp anymore. It'll be from the new Puerto Rico Corporation.
Okay.
The term that they like to use is a reasonable wage. And that's dependent upon your industry, how much you work, et cetera.
And I'll just elaborate a little bit on that, Joyce. Yes, for myself and Ted, as business owners of a U.S. brick and mortar, we actually take a W-2 in our Texas corporation, and we also take a W-2 in our Puerto Rico entity, and then we also take distributions, and those distributions, as we've talked about before, have zero taxes on those. So like Will said, it has to be a reasonable amount.
Here's another question. Do you have digital insurance platforms in Puerto Rico?
You mean like for the sales of insurance?
That I'm not sure. That they, if you could elaborate on that question, the person who submitted that question. And as we're waiting for that, that'll come in soon. Will, thank you. I know it's 3 o'clock and you've got to run. Thank you so much for being on with us. We really appreciate your time. He's gone, isn't he?
Yeah.
He is gone because we're way past 3 o'clock here in, you're in Texas.
Oh, yeah,
we're
that's
in the
true.
East Coast. It's 4 o'clock over here.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
He did
Exactly.
He did his hour, is where I'm going with that.
He did
All
it,
right.
Howard. Joyce, I'm going to help you a little bit because we have so many questions coming in on the chat.
Okay.
And so I want to just address this one, make sure that we definitely get to this one because it's really important. So we've been talking about the tax incentives for insurance companies, as what Walter explained. Those are for businesses that are doing non-Puerto Rico, that are dealing with non-Puerto Rico clients. And are there any incentives for creating a new insurance company that's serving Puerto Rico? So example, insuring properties located in Puerto Rico. What are the tax incentives set up, if any, for?
Yeah.
That's the right question.
Well, I think Walter explained that in the shed pretty well. I think the incentives are obviously to attract a new type of business that Puerto Rico does not have at the moment. And I think as Senior explained, the domestic insurance sector is pretty well developed and matured. And so as Walter explained, there's really not a shortage of reinsurance or insurance to be available in the domestic insurance market. So I'm not really sure there is a specific incentive for domestic insurance companies. Maybe Senior can clarify.
Ruben Senior just mentioned a couple of minutes ago regarding premium tax exemption for domestic insurers. So if you become a domestic insurer, you could have a premium tax exemption for your business here in Puerto Rico. And that's a huge incentive for you because, as you may know, the premiums are one of the main source of income that an insurer has. So happens to be also one of the biggest taxes that you may have to pay if you are not exempt. So whenever you become a domestic insurer, you may become also exempted from premium insurance premiums as well.
Thank you. I'm glad you caught that. That was going on in the chat. Didn't even see it. I'm in the Q&A. Hey, back to our other question about digital insurance platforms. It says to sell insurance products.
So it's for the sales of insurance products, right?
Yes, yes.
We do have in Puerto Rico laws and circular and normative letters in Puerto Rico that state the rules that you must follow in order to sell insurance using the internet. So there is quite a few considerations that you must take care of. But again, there is circular letters, normative letters, and the insurance code provides for the sale of insurance using the internet as well. So yes, there is.
We've got one more question that came through the chat. All right, I'm going to read this one off. Bear with me. So, Act 273 is an international bank license that allows a bank located elsewhere to only pay 4% tax rate on corporate net benefits. That's a question. And dividends paid to the offshore corporation are tax-free. But I would need to live in Puerto Rico to receive those dividends tax-free. That's still a question.
I'll try and take that one as a U.S. person who has moved to Puerto Rico. So Act 273 is the regulatory framework for the bank that also establishes the tax rate. Okay, so you get a bank with low tax with Act 273. The bank can do certain things. It has to have it's regulated by the Office of the Commissioner of Financial Institutions, and it has a charter. There are about 60 active IFBs and IBEs, which is the old law today. There's an association, just like the Puerto Rico International Insurers Association. If someone has interest in that side, we would send them to our friends over at the Puerto Rico International Bankers Association, who can answer questions about that. But tax point of view, the activities of the bank are conducted in Puerto Rico and taxed in Puerto Rico. If the bank has profits, then whatever the taxation of the owner of the bank, if the owner of the bank is taxed, like for example, if I lived in the U.S. and owned a Puerto Rico IFE and a profit, that would, as a U.S. person, I'd be taxed on that profit unless I became a Puerto Rican, in which case I could get an Act 20 and 22 and arrange things such that the income from that bank I would not owe a lot of tax on it. But if I just live in the U.S. and I put up a bank in Puerto Rico, I'm going to pay tax as a U.S. person on the profits of my bank in Puerto Rico. I hope that answers the question.
Hopefully that does. She'll let me know if it doesn't.
And we can set up a call with the bank guys if someone wants one. It's easy.
All right. Walter, so you are physically located in Puerto Rico, is that right?
Not today. I'm on vacation.
You're on vacation.
On vacation. So I'm in my vacation home.
Oh, today. Nice. Okay.
See, that sounds really strange to somebody in Texas.
Yeah.
You left Puerto Rico to go on vacation.
You left Puerto Rico to go on vacation, right?
Yeah, but we're fortunate. We get to see Walter here in Puerto Rico quite a bit. Not so much recently. We've gotten to see Alberto probably like not even 2 weeks ago at an event.
Yeah. I'll be back on Saturday.
Okay. And Walter, I think my notes say that Advantage Life, you do help to set up captives there in Puerto Rico. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, Advantage Life we're mostly life insurance as a company, but we have a significant business that advises companies on setting up and managing captive insurance companies around the world. And we operate in a lot of different domiciles, of which Puerto Rico is one.
Okay.
And we are domicile neutral. We love Puerto Rico. but we are domicile neutral on captives. And if our client has a good reason to be in Vermont instead of Puerto Rico, then that's where they go. But Puerto Rico is great, and for the company, for the clients that where Puerto Rico is the right choice for them, it's a great choice.
Thank you. Ruben Jr., could you talk to us a little bit more about the International Insurers Consulting Group? Talk to us about your consulting group.
Sure, absolutely, my pleasure. So IICG, International Insurance Consulting Group, was formed in February 2018. And the purpose of it is to help incoming investors or incoming companies to understand Puerto Rico's International Insurance Center. We're not providing tax advice. We're not providing accounting advice. We're essentially receiving the client, understanding what he needs, what his objectives are, and then making the connections with the appropriate service providers, which include a competent attorney, CPA, principal representative, an auditor, an actuary, and in many other ways. There's other relationships that need to be arranged. And so IICG is basically a manager that consults with the client, help them understand Puerto Rico's legislation, and then advises on the step-by-step process. We're also very much involved in the application process. Once a client decides to submit an application with the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, that's where Ruben Sr. and our colleagues play a big role. And after our clients are authorized in some aspects, we can provide management services to them, including the principal representation or other types of, in-house assistance that they would need once they're authorized. So it's essentially a consulting firm, and hopefully in the future we can do more of management services, which is our ultimate goal.
Thank you. I think if everybody's ready, and unless Ted and Arleen have something real quick, we'll kind of move on to the third phase of our discussion today.
Yeah, and Joyce, before we go on to that phase, I just want to make sure, I know that a lot of the attendees got the resource that our good friend Heidi put together on the tax acts, but if not, we want to make sure that everyone knows where to get them. A lot of this is a tax guide that our friend put together on coming to Puerto Rico, but it is centered around living in our community, which is in Palmas del Mar. But we have this amazing resource. It is an incredible guide, many, many pages, and it's such a great resource for people that are thinking about moving here or people that are here and, just banking, how to register your car, the water situation.
Basically, it's a book that'll save you thousands of dollars when you come here.
I'll copy the link in the chat so everybody can get it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
because the reason why we're using it is because it's such a helpful. Many people that have come into Puerto Rico to do business have found it to be just an amazing guide, from lawyers to accountants to anything you can think of.
As a matter of fact, Ted and I were just a few days ago hosting a couple that lives in Southern California, and they are they are for sure going to move to Puerto Rico towards the end of the year, and they've made the determination that they want to move to Palmas. And so we were showing them around and for a couple of days and telling them everything about what there is here in our community. So feel free, if you're an attendee, grab that guide, share it with others. I know there's a mass exodus from California and New York that are coming here to our community, so feel free to share that with them. Before we even pivot, Joyce, I want to get Joanne's perspective on, being from the carrier side to now being a regulator, on her situation in dealing with Puerto Rico before we even do a deep dive into licensing, Secretary of State filings, and all that good stuff.
But I was going to say, Joanne, I don't know what you're thinking, because most people are moving out of California, out of New York. You're moving from New York to California.
She went from one extreme to another extreme.
And I'm on my way out right now. I'm on my way to Puerto Rico.
Please.
What I've heard so far, I'm going to make a quick stop in California and just keep that ball rolling.
We're waiting for you here.
All right, I'm
Yeah.
joining you.
Yes. So talk to us about your transactions and your experience from the carrier side and from the agency side. Obviously, you were on the agency side for a big carrier.
And I think, I mean, I can address it, I'm going to say, at a somewhat general level, in that my role is really at the operational compliance piece of the business. So from the legal side and from our partners that we had in our legal department, a lot of the day in the ins and outs of getting ourselves established is really handled by another part of the company. But one of the things that I think I could share is really the transition of really being able to do business in Puerto Rico and how much it has been simplified and makes it much more capable to get up and running in the state, where in the past it was somewhat of a hairball, I'll use that word, to kind of get established. So one of the things that I could note is that our time to market, and this is where, from the agency perspective and being an insurance agency operating and wanting to have licensing in the state, that it became much easier to get up and running and to get our business working, I'm going to say, in these past 5 or 6 years. So to me, there have been a lot of really great changes in terms of promoting that business and interaction.
Yeah, until COVID. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. And both Rubens know what I'm talking about because I have been hitting them up for resources and for our clients. So we're going to get into that.
Right. Well, we're about to move into the licensing phase. And before we do, Alberto, I just want to give you a heads up. When we complete this, I would like for you to round out our discussion today with some information about the Partnership for Modern Puerto Rico. So you just be preparing for that for us, friend. We'll do that at the end.
It'll be a pleasure.
Okay. I want to turn it over now to Mr. Edward Rivera-Maldonado, and he's going to share quite a bit of information with us regarding the licensing process, and he will present on both the insurers side and then the agent side as well. Thank you so much for being here, Edward.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Joyce and Arleen and Ted. It's really important to discuss this type of topics. Now that we have talked about insurers, some of the information about it, let's talk about those who really sells the insurance for the insurance carriers. And I'm talking about, you know, agents, producers, and so on. But before actually moving into that, now that you mentioned about insurers, insurers here in Puerto Rico can become authorized mostly as the same way that it does in the United States, because we follow most of the model rules of the NAIC here in Puerto Rico. We have been dealing with many changes to our insurance code in order to become more uniform with those standards set up by the NAIC. Actually, we are a NAIC accredited jurisdiction. In fact, Puerto Rico was the first territory to become accredited by the NAIC. And what's the accreditation from the NAIC? Well, it's actually an accreditation given by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, which is the NAIC, to those jurisdictions or states that has all of the highest standards in regulation and solvency programs. And Puerto Rico does have the accreditations quite a few years quite a few years ago. So we are an accredited jurisdiction. If people wants to know really how to submit application for insurers here in Puerto Rico, I encourage them to visit www.ucaa.nic.org. And I repeat it again, www.ucaa.nic.org, and find out the link for Puerto Rico, and you'll find out there capital requirements, documents that you will be needing in order to start your authorization process here for an insurer. And again, think about domestic insurers, because domestic insurers, again, do have a tremendous tax benefits, which is the premium tax exemption. So consider that as part of your business plan, at least for insurers. You can also visit, of course, the main page for the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, which is www.ocs.pr.gov. That's the main page for exactly. That's exactly the web page site for the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance. There you will find also a checklist with all of the documents that the insurers has to file with the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance through the site that I mentioned earlier, which is the UCAA site developed by the NIC for the Uniform Certificate of Authority application.
Edward,
Now,
if you'll give me that website address for the
Sure.
NAIC, I'll type that in as well.
Sure. You want me to repeat it?
Yeah, if you would please, and I'll put it in real quick.
Sure. That'd be www.ucaa.nic.org.
Okay, I've got both of those websites.
So there you will find, and of course look for the link for Puerto Rico, and you will find all the information you need for the running application for an insurer here in Puerto Rico. Now, talking about those who really sells the insurance for the insurance carriers, I have to say that now that you are planning to sell insurance from Puerto Rico, you should review Chapter 9 of Insurance Code of Puerto Rico. That's actually the legal source for licensing requirements. Chapter 9 of Insurance Code is the legal source for licensing requirement, I repeat. Puerto Rico has adopted the Producer Licensing Model Act approved by the NIC years ago. So therefore, our licensing requirements are quite very similar to those in any other U.S. jurisdiction, because most of the U.S. jurisdictions has adopted the Producer Licensing Model Act. Therefore, we have basically the same requirements. Of course, there are a few changes or quite a few differences between that Model Act and the law that we have here in Puerto Rico, because we do have a lot of licenses that are not within that Model Act that we also offer here in Puerto Rico. In fact, here in Puerto Rico, we do have more than 13,000 licensees between resident and non-resident here in Puerto Rico. We have more than 10 license class here in Puerto Rico, and I'm going to mention quickly those. I'm not going to discuss each one because we don't have time, but the main one I'm going to discuss a little bit, which is the producer license for individual and business entity, author of representative, which is a variation of producer because it's actually a producer, but being appointed by one or more insurers. Here in Puerto Rico, if you are appointed by an insurer for the sale of insurance, you becomes to be an authorized representative, which is a producer appointed by one or more insurers. Okay, so we have producers, authorized representative, solicitors, general agent, managers, adjusters, consultants, reinsurance intermediary for producer, reinsurance intermediary producer, reinsurance intermediary managers, provisional or temporary license. And that's a license that I'm going to talk a little bit about because it's quite unique throughout the United States. Now, I have heard Arleen mention a couple of times about Department of State, and something that you have to do with the Department of State. Well, that's true. If you are moving into Puerto Rico to establish here in Puerto Rico and your business entity here, if you are a business entity, you will have to go through the State Department first to register the corporation that will be licensed with the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance. So you first will have to go and register your corporation over there before actually going through the process of getting licensed with the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance. And something quite very important that you have to take into consideration is the nature or the purposes of the business entity you are registering. Because if you just place there like doing any kind of business, the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance is going to return that application because you have to, and I repeat, this is quite very important, you have to, in the place where the Department of State asks you for the purposes or nature of the business entity, you have to mention that you are there. I mean, you are registering that business entity for the sale of insurance. At least you gotta say that. Otherwise, the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance will not allow you to have the license. So you cannot register the corporation for general purposes. It doesn't mean you can have that business entity doing some other business activity if you are allowed to do so. But at least you have to mention that you are planning to sell insurance in Puerto Rico. So that's quite very important. Another thing that you have to consider, and this is something that we have to manage with the Department of State, is that sometimes when you register the corporation using the online services developed by the Department of State, if you mention the word insurance, the system will not allow you to register the corporation. Yeah, I know.
Right here.
Experience.
I know.
Okay.
Don't get me started.
You're gonna start a riot. You shouldn't have brought that up.
Let me go over this issue because in the past let me go back a step. In the past, when the insurers wants to become authorized in Puerto Rico, they will go first to the Department of State and register themselves there, and then going to the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance to start the process. And what happened is that with insurers, that process is the opposite. You have to start the process in the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, then the office will register the insurance company with the Department of State. And in order to make sure that the insurer does not get registered with the Department of State before actually going to the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, they manage the system to stop anything that says insurance as part of the registration process. And that's what is causing this type of issue.
Yeah.
Now,
and so I just want to jump in here because you guys know that our attendees, and I saw a message from Wilma.
It took her long enough to jump in.
Tell them, Arleen.
I know.
So here's the thing. We're totally familiar with that. There's lots of states where you have to go through the corporate qualification process with the Secretary of State before you submit your applications to the insurance departments. We're totally familiar with that. There's a lot of states that you can get the license and then get your filing with the Secretary of State done. Now, for all of the attendees that are here today, what I want to bring up to you is, and we're even familiar with the word insurance. We know Massachusetts, New York, California, they have special naming requirements. So we're totally familiar with that we know that if the word insurance is in there, we have to do other things. Now, the issue in Puerto Rico at the Secretary of State level is that And the word insurance can only be, it triggers that it is for an insurance carrier. If you are an insurance agency, you cannot submit the application online. So we're totally familiar with that. Normally, when we're submitting applications online at the Secretary of State in Puerto Rico, those are getting issued, what, Christy, like in 24 hours, 48 hours?
24, almost instantaneously. I mean, it's like they have to stamp approval and it's issued.
Yeah. So when it does have the word insurance, you cannot, the only way that you can do it is by walking it in. So it hasn't been a problem because Ted and I live in Puerto Rico. So we go down to Minillas,
right.
and we walk it in. And unfortunately, there is a glitch with the system where, because that's why you can only walk it in, because they actually have to look at it and they ask you, are you sure that you're not an insurance company? We're like, no, our client is an insurance agency. Okay, good. In 24 hours, we'll have it approved. Well, now with COVID, there's no one there. Wilma had been so kind, who's one of the attendees and of course a former regulator, and Eduardo, you know her very well. She sent me a link that I can actually do an appointment to go in live and see them. No one responds to us. No one responds to us on the call. And I hate to use this webinar to kind of like talk about the issues that we're having, but that's what's happening right now because of COVID. So that is a unique situation right now. So you can't walk it in right now if your insurance agency has the word insurance in it. So we have several clients that are pending for several months.
And we started a conversation with the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance representative in order to deal with this issue, because I know it's a glitch within the system, because it has to be tied with an insurance carrier in order to stop the process, but not with any other business entity. So we started a conversation with them, and hopefully we will find an answer or a solution, a good one for that kind of issue. So yes, taking back again the topic that I was discussing, yes, you will have to go through the Department of State first in order to get your license. Then you will have to go through a system named NIPR. NIPR is actually part of the NAIC, actually. That's the National Registry. I'm mistaking probably the acronym, but that's NIPR, National Insurance Registry. And that one is the system that you will use in order to file your application. Your application will probably be pending until the representative of the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance review that everything is in order. And if everything is in order, then they will approve your transaction, and there you will get your license. So it's not complicated if you know exactly what to do and make the properly steps. Now, something very important with people moving from states to Puerto Rico is that you should not resign, or what it's called voluntary resignation, to your license in your home state before you actually make contact here in Puerto Rico, just to make sure that you close the gap between the time that you resign your license in your home state and the time that you become actually licensed here in Puerto Rico. That's quite very important, because otherwise you may find yourself in a situation where you wouldn't have license for weeks or something like that.
Edward, real quick, would you suggest someone get a non-resident license in Puerto Rico? And does that make it any easier or any faster to do the conversion to a resident, or does it not really make a difference?
It doesn't make really a difference. You can get a non-resident license quite easy using, again, NIPR system. That's quite easy to obtain. But what I have to deal with some of my clients is don't voluntarily surrender to your license in your home state. Let me make sure that everything is in proper place, meaning, the Department of State process, the NIPI process, that I have made the properly contact with the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, that they have reviewed everything and they are really ready to click on, whatever is needed to click on to make sure that he becomes licensed, then I suggest at that point to my client to resign that license in your home state. And probably 1 or 2 days later, you become licensed here in Peru.
Yeah. The other thing that I think it's really important to reiterate is, especially for an agency that has licenses probably in 50 states, it is not necessary to re-domesticate. You do not need to re-domesticate to Puerto Rico as a resident, because part of the NAIC is you could be domiciled in any state. That does not affect your resident insurance license. So you can be domiciled as a Delaware corporation and be a Puerto Rico resident insurance agency. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, because when you go to dissolve, and Christy, you can talk more on this, Sabrina, when you go and dissolve your entity in that domicile jurisdiction, you're starting from scratch.
From scratch, exactly.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's a lot of money and a lot of time.
Yeah, and in some states it can take quite a while to do. So if you can avoid it, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
I second that.
One of the things that I wanted to mention was about the temporary or provisional license. That type of license is quite very effective to those business entities that wants to establish here in Puerto Rico. Let's say, for example, that they want to establish like a call center to sell insurance in the States, and they want to hire 20 or 50 people to make the phone calls or so. And they will have people with license to make the phone calls because they have to be licensed people. So sometimes what you can do is have this temporary license for you people, which is a license that you can have in a very easy, because people must comply with some certain requirements, but it's licensed for people pending to take the exam, pending to take the examination. So it's people that it'll be your responsibility, because it'll be under your responsibility to appoint those temporary license. But these people will be pending to take the exam, but they can start right away to sell insurance on behalf of your business entity as a general agency here in Puerto Rico. And that's a temporary license up to 6 months. People can get a license, start to study for the license exam. And if they approve, they can convert that license into a permanent license, like a producer or an authorized representative license. Of course, if they fail the exam, then that temporary license is immediately canceled.
So you better get it right.
Yeah, well, you have up to 6 months to get ready for your test. So you should be able to do it if you follow the instruction, if you study properly from the study manual that the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance sells for you. So it is possible if you take this seriously, if you take this as a profession, if you take this with all the responsibility that it comes with.
All right, thank you so much. I want to switch real quick over to Christy and Sabrina, and let's talk about some of the practical application of licensing. And Edward's already touched on it, the requirement to become qualified at the Department of State and then to move into the licensing. So Sabrina, can you kind of tell us a little bit about what that requirement is at the Department of State? And I think you mentioned that you can do that rather quickly.
Yes, actually, it's not a very complicated process. Like we mentioned before, it can be submitted online as long as insurance isn't in the name. One of the great things about all the Secretary of State offices when you're trying to apply for these certificate of authority applications, a lot of that has moved online and made the process entirely so much easier. You know, if you don't have the right information, or, you know, if you didn't, say you skipped over something or you missed something, there's a lot of checks and balances in place. So submitting that online has definitely become a lot easier. If insurance is in the name, that really isn't a hard process either if it wasn't the year 2020 and COVID wasn't surrounding us. It's just a matter of submitting that paper application. Of course, I get everything ready. We do have to use a cashier's check instead of like a regular company check, which is a little bit different process for us, but still relatively easy. You know, it's got to be made out to us, you know, the department, I think it's Departamento of Hacienda or something like that. I don't know. Don't even get me started on that mess.
I like the effort. I like
but it's very specific, you know, each state, just like in this case, Puerto Rico, they all have their specific requirements that you have to meet, and it has to be set in place. But yeah, we get that all ready to go. And the great thing about having Ted and Arleen open up a business in Puerto Rico is they have a walk in, hey, here you go, stamp it. And again, it's again, we get it 24, 48 hours. I think it takes just enough time for them to process it and scan it, put it in their records, and it's emailed to us and online immediately the next day. So the process is really quite simple in that sense. There's definitely been some hiccups, of course, because, you know, one, for us, we're ILSA, so, you know, the majority of our clients are all insurance agencies. So a lot of them are going to have some form of the word insurance, whether it's in their name or in their purpose. So that definitely has caused some issues with some of our clients. One of the questions that I do have, and I just realized I don't have the ability to ask a question, but because I can talk, I'm going to ask it. Edward, do you know of any kind of like workarounds for that? Because I know on the application that we submit to the state, we do have the ability to change the name from our true name. So could we do like a forced fictitious name and omit the word insurance? Is that going to cause issues on the licensing side?
Yes, and let me explain why. Yeah, let me explain why. Because even though Puerto Rico allows you to use kind of a DBA, you can use it. Prior to use a DBA, you have to become licensed as it is. I mean, you will have to become licensed whatever names that you have chosen. So after making that process, then you'll be able to use a DBA. So you cannot go all the way around.
Backwards, yeah.
And of course, the other workaround that we've been told to do is to just submit the application without the word insurance in there and then file an amendment. And we just don't like that workaround, you know, like for later on to have to, you know, amend the name.
Well, I also foresee us still having the same issue anyways, because even if you go in to file an amendment and to add insurance back, you're still going to have the same issue until the states. I'm sure that amendment, if we're adding insurance to the name, is going to have to be filed in person. So unless the offices are opened and willing to take that on and prove that you're not an insurance company, you're still in the same boat. So I'm kind of like, I don't really think that would be a good, you know, workaround.
Yeah. Hey, Joyce, since we're talking about COVID, I would love if Russ would just share with us our ILSA newsroom where we have all of the COVID-19 plus a lot more of all of the regulatory bulletins that are put out by the state so that a lot of our attendees know where to find that, because we have a lot of new attendees on this session. So if we'll just share that.
All right. Can you guys see our state regulators contact information?
Sure can.
Then that's the wrong tab. So for you guys that have not been on the webinars, on our ILSA Inc. webpage, we have a crew of folks here at ILSA who keep up with all of the regulatory bulletins all the time, and they get them posted as quick as they can. I brag on them. They told me to stop doing that because they got so busy they couldn't keep it up at the pace that they normally do. But we have them often before the states actually post them because we get those notifications and our folks grab them and put them up here. So anything and everything to do with the states is going to be on this page. If you go to ilsainc.com, click on our newsroom, it'll take you right to these. And they are as up to date as this one from California on the 26th. So we're keeping up pretty good. They involve everything from maybe changes at the DOI due to COVID-19. They're all tagged. So if you have a specific issue that you want to check, you just scroll down the page here. You can search, certainly, but you can also just look for a tag, and it will bring you every bulletin that's tagged with that topic. So very good resource. This is out there for free for everybody. We want to make sure that all the folks in our industry have access to the most current information, and it's just handy to have it in one place rather than have to go state to state. However, if you do need some information from the state, on our resource page, we have all the state regulators' contact information. So you can scroll down to your state, click on there. Look, we have Puerto Rico. It will bring up the DOI's contact information. We've got email addresses. If they have a licensee search, which Puerto Rico does, if you click on there, it'll take you directly to that feature on their website. We've got the Department of Revenue, Secretary of State, and in the case of Secretary of State, if they have an entity search, we'd have a link directly to that as well. So these are some great resources. They're out there for you guys to help you stay in touch with what's going on or get in touch if you need to ask questions.
That's awesome. Thank you, Russ.
Thank you, Russ. Walter, I don't know if you've noticed over in the chat, someone's asking a question of you. Walter mentioned some grants and incentives possibly available to insurance carriers. Where may I find this information?
Ruben Jr. Is the place to go for it. It's the old Act 399, and it's not so much it's a grant in the sense of a legal document as a grant, and the incentives are tax incentives that are bestowed by the legal document of the grant. It's not a grant like you get free money. It's a grant in that you pay less money in the future, and it's straightforward. And I'd urge you to speak with IICG for information about it.
Okay, that's their consulting group. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Ruben and Ruben's consulting group
With
is
Ruben and Ruben. And Frank is one who has asked for information about all of our panelists today, and I've let Frank know what my email address is. Also, you can email ccquestions@ilsainc.com. You're welcome to email me direct, j.king@ilsainc.com, and I will share the panelists' information. I hope that's okay. Panelists, can I share your information? Is that all right? I've already volunteered to do it.
Yes, that's fun.
All right. Christy, real quick, talk to us about, I know we've already kind of covered some of the quirkiness in the licensing procedure. Maybe talk to us about non-resident licensing.
Well, I would like to circle back a little bit to the different types of licenses that a normal producer in the grand scheme of things would get if they were to apply for the Puerto Rico licenses. There are 3 separate types of licenses, and it doesn't translate for a normal United States producer going into Puerto Rico. You have to really pay attention to what the type of license that you're applying for is, because like it was said earlier, they really do different things. So an authorized representative is a producer that is the one that could be appointed to many carriers, almost like an independent, without an agency, an independent producer. An authorized representative is an authorized person is your designated producer for an agency. and then a producer, an authorized person. That is like your producer license, but it's for the designated producer, or it's for the agency. Sorry, I know that's confusing. NIPR offers a breakdown of all of the different types of licenses. So you really need to pay attention. If you're doing the Puerto Rico license on your own, you really need to pay attention to what you're applying for. And another quirk about Puerto Rico is, even though you're a resident of the United States, you must have a resident of Puerto Rico, a resident agent, or an agency, or a physical presence in Puerto Rico that will house your records. It could, in some cases, be the carrier who will have records of the policies that were wrote. In some cases, it can be, I think we call them couriers here, but they have to know if the Department of Insurance is conducting an audit. They have to be able to answer the questions. They have to know a portion of the work that you're doing. They can't just be, you know, your cousin that lives in Puerto Rico. They can't be that. So that is another quirk about Puerto Rico that a lot of our clients don't understand. They have to meet before we can get them a license, and unfortunately there's just no way around that. And it is frustrating for our clients when we tell them, no, it's not that easy, it's going to take a little while, you have to have this in place. Even though Puerto Rico is a part of the NAIC and the Uniform Act, they do have, just like Florida and New York and California, they do have their own state-specific requirements that have to be met. And if you want to get a license, you really need to look at the fine details in Puerto Rico. So.
And Christy, if you will just kind of expound a little bit on the difference between that registered agent, which you do need to have in Puerto Rico, versus that resident agent, because I know sometimes that terminology is just convoluted and mixed up.
I was about to ask the exact same question.
So in our terms, a registered agent is the CT Corp, the RASI is the corporate creation. They're your registered agent. If a service of process comes down from, you know, you're being sued.
From the courts in Puerto Rico, yeah.
Yeah, from the courts, exactly. They have to have a physical location that they can deliver that service of process to. In Puerto Rico, though, just like in your domicile, it can be a lawyer. In most cases, though, it is one of those national registered agent companies. A resident agent is like a resident producer or a resident of Puerto Rico, a resident entity of Puerto Rico. So there are two completely different processes there, and that is a common term that we do hear a lot of that gets easily mistaken for one or the other.
Hey, Christy, a question real quick on the resident agent. Do they need to be, like I think you said earlier, they have to have a working knowledge of insurance. So do they need to be in one way, shape, or another licensed by the Department of Insurance, whether they're either an insurer or they are themselves a resident agent? Insurance agent licensed?
So we have gotten conflicting information before, and I don't know if we were asking the question the same way each time we receive this conflicting this information. So if one of the representatives from the DOI or Wilma could answer that question, that would be, you know, better than me saying yes and then they come back and saying no. So
Edward, you could probably help us on that one.
I think Wilma's already answered it in the chat.
Oh, well, she's actually talking about it was more on the authorized representative versus the producer. That's what she was elaborating. She said all of the employees of the agency who will sell, solicit, or negotiate insurance and PR are on behalf of the agency will need to have an authorized person,
Yes.
but licensed. But what we're talking about here is whether that person that's serving as the resident agent, whether they have to be licensed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Wilma, if you can answer that also on the chat, that would be great while Edward is also answering.
Yeah, I was going to say that that's quite very important. It's a different requirement.
Mhm.
One is for the Department of State, and the other requirement is for the DOI, or the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance per se. You can use the same person as long as they do have contact with your transactions here in Puerto Rico. In other words, you should not use those companies that typically you use for the Department of State and the get the service of process with them to be also the person registered with the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance. You should not use them for that purposes, but you can use the same person registered for the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance being your registered person in order to be registered with the Department of State in order to receive service of process. You can use the same person that way. We from my office we have been dealing with that because it happens to be that I am a lawyer. So I serve at both in some instance for my clients in order to save them sometimes, and money, of course, because you don't have to pay for both services. You can use the same person if the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance authorize that person to be your registered person for your business here in Puerto Rico.
Okay, great. So Wilma did also put on the chat, because I think what you were saying, Edward, is it can't really be vice versa. But so if you're using like a national registered agent service, that necessarily wouldn't be the person that you would list for the insurance commissioner.
Right.
But Wilma did clarify, and I'm sure that you would, Edward, agree with her that the person that you're listing for the insurance commissioner's office does not have to be a licensed individual.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a licensed individual because it is not required. All that they want is a person with presence here in Puerto Rico, with an open office here in Puerto Rico, that can, if they want to make an audit, they can have a place where to go. If they want to put in contact with the licensee, which is a non-resident licensee, they need to be able to get in contact with the person representing them here in Puerto Rico.
Are you aware of, I do have a question. Are you aware of someone that offers that service as, so like Ted and Arleen, they could offer a walk-in service to the Secretary of State or to the DOI if they'd like to do that. But do you know of someone that offers that specific service that we could use for our clients as like a, one, always use this, entity for this registered agent, resident agency. I even do it myself, resident agent.
Well, depending of the license class they are asking here as a non-resident, from time to time I have served my office. I put my office here available for that purposes, depending on the license class they are asking here in Puerto Rico.
Edward, can you just elaborate on that? Why does it depend on the license class? Because I know that's going to be our question.
Yeah, let me explain to that. Because I don't manage public adjuster's license here in my office. Okay? I used to do it, but no longer working with. Okay, so I do manage producer license. I do manage author representative licenses. I do manage surplus lines brokers. Those type of license, I'm willing to manage the registration with the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance. I'm registered for some of those right now.
Okay.
with no problems at all.
Okay, I saw Christy took all of that information down. Hey, Joyce, before we wrap up, I want to make sure that Alberto has an opportunity to talk about the partnership for Modern Puerto Rico.
Absolutely. I cannot believe we went a full 2 hours. So not
I
to
knew
cut
it would.
anybody off, not to cut anybody off. I know we've covered a lot, but we do need to give Alberto at least 4 minutes to talk to us about the partnership.
It has been excellent, very informative, nice flow. So I'm a fan. The Partnership of Modern Puerto Rico basically is part of the process of Puerto Rico of changing, of modernizing itself. And we believe that the basis is this special group of professionals that have moved to Puerto Rico. We have talked today about the laws that enable that. And we believe that this special group has also to create friendships and collaboration with the traditional local families that are very interested in getting to know what is going on in this new economic development creation. So our objective is to create that do tank to foster that collaboration. How we do it? We do it by education of both the local component and the new residents. There's a lot to understand how these laws operate. There are some misconceptions. We also promote further to bring capital to Puerto Rico, to bring more people to move to Puerto Rico. And we create activities that have take-home value, but at the same time create collaboration. At the end of the day, our objective is that Puerto Rico gets into the modern currents, gets a more globalized vision, and have a better place for everyone to live. So at the end of the day, the members of the partnership becomes ambassadors of Puerto Rico, and also becomes disruptors at the same time. We are an island, a lot of insular and island mentality that we have to transition it to more globalized thing of conversation is one of the many things we get engaged. So it's a pleasure. I am always available to talk about the partnership and moving to Puerto Rico and anything you need to know about that process.
Thank you, Alberto.
What a fantastic, fantastic panel we've had today. Thank you so much, everybody. We literally took it all the way, 2 hours. I can't believe it.
Awesome.
And we could probably even have a part 2 because I know we haven't touched it all.
That's awesome.
And,
I hope
it's important if I can say that Arleen and Ted are very supportive members, and Walter and Advantage are also very supporting members of the partnership.
Very
and
good.
I invite you all to learn more about it.
I just noticed that because I haven't been able to see all the participants, but I just got a hand raised by Luann Petrellis, and I know she is an attorney that specializes in the reinsurance space. She did an episode with us on Spot On Insurance, and thank you, Luann, for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you to everyone that has joined us. If you guys think of other questions, if you guys need to get in touch with any of our panelists, send an email to ccquestions@ilsainc.com. Feel free to reach out to us. And also remember that we have a podcast, Spot On Insurance, where we're covering a lot of these topics. Ruben have been on there, senior and junior, and we definitely would love to share with you guys more about our experience of being here in Puerto Rico.
And don't forget that if you could need the replay on this, you can always get it on our Spot on Insurance YouTube channel. We have all our different webinars are on there. And this one will be up there starting tomorrow. Guys, thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Be safe.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.